to and read another chapter, and I'm Shalise, and I'm so glad that you have decided to click this video and watch my thoughts on the subject. But before we get into that, I do want to give a caveat that this is my reading journal. I am a mom of 5, and I am constantly going to be interrupted. This is the second time of trying to film this video. The first 7 minutes of the last video that I started had 1 minute of actual footage that I could use. I'm in my daughter's room. There really is nowhere else that has okay lighting. Okay, we're having a little rough time with the lighting here. And it's the quietest room in the house right now. Okay, so today's video is kind of the dangers with reading and the things that we should probably think about and be aware of. Also with the place that I am filming this. This is right in front of the window that looks out to all the neighbors. So guess what the neighbors are all seeing? This window with a camera in it and someone sitting behind it, and I'm sure they're a little creeped out. I've had more than one look at me like, oh my goodness. Okay, so in order to start this video, how to be a critical reader, let's call it that, I want to kind of go back throughout my life as a reader. Being homeschooled and having all of this literature at my fingertips that my mom had cultivated this library for us, there was always just good quality literature to read. And that's what I grew up on. And then then as a teenager, I read a lot of Christian fiction. A lot. Then as a young mom, escape reality. Those Christian fiction books would tell me these wonderful lies that in the epilogues and the happily ever afters, the mothers would cuddle their babies and they would nurse, and it was this wonderful bonding experience. And I'm like, yep, nope. Mine is I need a cow. And this is terrible. This is a terrible experience. This is nothing bonding about this. There is nothing. She is sucking the life out of me. So, you read books and they tell you all these lies about it. Alright, let me pause number 1. Somebody just showed up in my house. Let's try this again. Okay, I think I was telling you about my journey as a reader, and just now I was trying to escape with these Christian fiction books. So at this point I had my Prince Charming, and it was, a lot of those books just became so full of formulas. The Christian fiction realm, I'm thinking of people like Mary Connolly and Lori Wick and even like Beverly Lewis, Beth Wiseman, all these people, they just have the same story with different named characters. Or characters of a different name, but same story. And as I was growing, not just as a reader, but as a woman, there just came this whole idea of that the difficulties Christians face are whether or not God has a man for us, or whether or not the man that we're falling in love is going to love us back, or whatever it is. I was at a point in my life where I was having friends that were walking away from the faith. I was having friends that were choosing lifestyles that I didn't agree with. I was having friends come in my life that were not Christians. And it's not like it's put in the books with the conversations of bringing them to Jesus and then they're, Christians at the end of this conversation that you have once or twice. And then I was having, again, with these non-Christians within my life, we were having conversations that I didn't have answers to. Things that I can't really pull out of my hat and say, well, this is the conversation we had and I didn't know how to respond to that. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. But I I would have difficulties in feeling motivated to pick up all these Christian books. It got to a point where, yes, I could whip out 30 Christian fiction books in a month. Wow. Okay, let's say it was more like 15. You know, a voracious Christian fiction reader, but there was no growth in my life. And some people may say, well, you weren't reading your Bible enough. And it's not that I wasn't reading my Bible. I was. They're just, it's interesting to me how the questions and the problems that come up in your life, they also kind of tie into how you're reading the Bible. All of this to say, at that point, I kind of transitioned more into a secular reader. And I actually can remember the first secular book that I ever read as a Christian woman. And it was one that I had seen on How Jen Does It. Maybe some of you have watched her channel. But it was actually a book on her channel. And she had talked about her Christian faith on and off throughout there. I mean, it's not saturated within her videos. She talks more about how to live a more organized homemaking life. And she had this book that she was talking a lot about and how she really enjoyed it. And it was The Woman on the Train, I believe. I'll put it right here. And it's a mystery thriller. And so I checked it out from my library. I got a little bit into it and I was surprised at the language. But at that point I was kind of vested into the story. So I kept going forward and I kept reading the book. And it was probably the first book that had so many twists and turns that I had ever read. I'd never read much of this. And I was just very surprised by it. I was more surprised because this Christian woman had talked about it, and it wasn't a clean read, if you understand what I mean. But it kind of started me thinking about all these other things. It was then that I remember listening to another mom on YouTube, Homeschool for Two, and she is a youth pastor's wife. And she was talking about how she was reading the books that her youth was reading within the church so that she could have these conversations and that she would know what they were reading and things like that, and how she had found that these youth would then trust her with more information because she knew what she was talking about. I was also in Walmart and I was listening to two girls, take this with a grain of salt, as I did. But I was listening to two girls look at the book section. And one of the girls turned to the other and said, oh, you should really read this. And I think it was 5 Feet Apart. It had just come out. But they were talking about that. And the one girl was like, oh, you should read this. And the other one said, my mom won't let me read that. And the other girl's like, why? And mom was like, well, she's, and I'm trying to remember, but the gist of it was, well, she doesn't think it's good for me to read those kinds of books. And again, that was cleaned up. The other girl was more bad talking her mom than how I put it. And the girl's like, oh, does that mean you can't read like the John Green one? The John Green book. Oh my goodness, and I read that one too, but I can't remember that. But does that mean you can't read this one either? And mom's like, no. Mom just doesn't think I should read anything. So I just never read anything. Or I think it had to do with the books were too old for these girls who were 16 years old. They were about that age. And that scene and me remembering my mom not letting us read Harry Potter because it was they were evil series and we weren't going to do that. And then she actually read them and said, I was wrong. You can actually read these. These are not what I thought they were. I had all of these kind of going on at the same time. And so I started branching more and more out. Again, all of this happened. If I had done this 5 years earlier, I wouldn't have been ready for it. I was at this point in my walk where I was maturing more and I was growing more and I was ready to read these without getting really bogged down by them or being influenced heavily by them. And they brought up questions that for me, I was like, well, what do I believe about this? And where am I basing that belief on? How am I coming to this conclusion? But fast forward 5 or 6 years from that point, it's probably been about 5 or 6 years. And now I am at this point in my journey where now I'm starting to look at reading differently, and that kind of comes to the story. That's what comes to the point of this video, which has taken a long time to get here. And that is, what goals are you trying to meet when you read? Are you trying to escape? Are you trying to grow? Are you trying to learn something about yourself? Are you trying to be understanding of are you trying to understand other cultures more? Are you trying to better yourself? Are you trying to solidify your beliefs? Are you trying to anything like, and it's all out there. That's where this idea comes in. Now that I have become a more prolific reader, I don't have any more babies. I'm not chasing after everything. I have older readers. I have found more time to read. And in the last 3 years, I have read over 100 books every year. And that's, a great thing to boast about, right? But I also kind of want to think about what I'm trying to do as a reader. That doesn't come out right, but hopefully you understand what I mean by that. I have had people in my life growing up, and I have watched this, where they read and they assume nobody knows as much as they do because of the amount of books that they have read. And their conversation is very domineering, and like, you need to listen to my words of wisdom because I am much more well-read than you. I've had those people in my life. And every time I'm around them and they talk about, well, I read in this and blah, 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 and I've done this and blah, blah, blah. And I'm always thinking, because they're just not pleasant people to be around, I've always thought, there's that verse that says, they're always learning and never able to come to the knowledge of truth. And I don't want to be that kind of reader. I don't want to read just to gain all this knowledge, to fill it in my head, and just have knowledge up there. It's really been heavily on my mind. I've been trying to think about how to move forward in this, not just to read to escape. That's not a good purpose. Okay, that's not a good purpose in reading. It's not to escape reality. To have some downtime, to kind of relax and just take a breather, that I'm all on board with. But to read to escape kind of goes into a little bit of a Catherine issue from Northanger Abbey, where you start imagining things that just aren't realistic because you want this more exciting adventure out there. I don't want to read just to gain all this knowledge that's just knowledge and not being used. And that is where a lot of what I have right now, where I'm at. So I don't just want to read, I want to grow as a person. I think it's time to kind of consider what the pitfalls are of our reading. Is it really to, at the end of the day, claim a number? Or is it at the end of the day to have learned something more about yourself, about the world around you, and something that can be applicable in your life in some way? I think that may mean that I have more DNFs in my future. Just, there's so many wonderful books out there, and if I'm pushing through something, just to have another book read or whatever, I'm not sure it's worth it anymore. I'm getting older. My kids are getting older, and I think it's time to treat reading like another tool. It's kind of like Instagram and social media. When we invest our time in whatever capacity it is, we want a return on it. And I think that's why there is so many cautions about social media. Like, okay, you're investing your time in this. Does it have a good return on your investment. And that's how I want my reading to be. I want it to have a good return on my investment in my time. And because of that, I'm starting to get a little bit more selective in my reading. I am kind of going a little bit more towards Christian fiction. I have noticed that there is a lot of great authors out there recently that I'm falling in love with. And I think moving forward, I'm just going to start looking at books like that. What return on my investment is this book going to give me if I put my time into it? I think at the end of this video is about where I was trying to go in all this and wrapped it up so well. So we'll see how editing works out. Leave your thoughts in the comment section down below. I would love to further discuss this with you and have your thoughts on it. And until next time, bye.